I'm really excited today to have Michael Burch Pesses join us here in OBDA Conversations. He has been involved with Oregon Music Educators National Conference. He is a past president of the Oregon Band Directors Association, and he's also the Oregon chair of the College Band Directors National Association and a charter member of the Oregon chapter of Phi Beta Mu. Michael, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for the invitation.
Well, school's out for a lot of Oregon band directors, and everybody's been struggling with the COVID-19 virus and how they were coping with that. What did you do as the band director of Pacific? How did you survive these last couple months?
Well, it was a brand new experience. We quit teaching face-to-face in mid-March, and we had to teach the last 6 weeks through distance learning. And the only classes that I have in the spring are symphonic band and jazz band. And I was just at a loss to know how to teach those from a distance. So I polled the members of the bands, and I said, I can offer you instruction on the history of jazz for the jazz band and the history of the wind band for the symphonic band. If you think that would be satisfactory, that would give you some background on how your ensemble got to be where it is today. These are courses that I took when I was a master's degree student. You could get it as an undergraduate. Does this sound good to you? And they all not only bought into it, but were very excited about it. So I made up new lessons based on all my notes from my master's program, and sent them out 2 a week to both groups, and I got really positive feedback from them. So I lucked out for those 6 weeks, but boy, I sure wouldn't want to do that again. It's not musically satisfying.
No, and I know that a lot of band directors right now are really trying to figure out, like everybody is, what they're going to be doing next fall. And they have the ODE recommendations just came out, their first version, and hopefully some things will change. And I think that might be something that we can explore maybe through a Zoom meeting or doing some type of conversation with all the band directors, what they did and what will be happening in the fall. But most people only know you as the band director at Pacific University and as a person hosting the state solo contest and the chamber contest. But most don't know that you come from a Navy family and you've had an amazing career in the Navy band. Did you move around a lot when you were growing up?
My dad was in the Navy, and so we moved around a great deal. And then when he retired from the Navy, we continued to move. I think he must have had a bad case of wanderlust. So we continued to move. I lived in Arizona, I lived in Kansas, and I ended up in Colorado, which I still sort of consider my home state, even though I'm an Oregonian now. And I was in band and choir from the 3rd grade on. I was in both band and choir. In the 3rd grade, it was just rhythm band, you know.
What do you mean by rhythm band?
You bang and clang on percussion instruments.
Okay.
And then in the 4th grade, then I actually got into a band. And by the time I started in 4th grade band, I had progressed to the trumpet, but that was not my first instrument. My first instrument was the accordion. Really, I'm in 1st grade, and I can't remember if it was at the beginning of 1st grade or the second half of 1st grade, but I was either 6 or 7. And my dad came in very excited one day, and he said, "Michael, how would you like to play an instrument?" And I said, "Great," because my dad was a music teacher, and he had his own music studio. And I could hear all those sounds coming up from the basement, and I thought it would be great if I could do that. So I said, "What would you like me to play?" And he says, "Just a minute. It's out. I have it out in the hallway. Let me go get it. So he left the room and he came back in with a full-size accordion. Now I'm in the first grade. I
Yeah.
can barely see over the top of the thing. And and he said, I've made arrangements for you to have 6 weeks of lessons on the accordion. I said, oh, are you going to give them to me? And he said, no, I have a teacher for you. Well, the teacher was clear across town. So I had to take the bus to my lessons.
First grader taking the bus with an accordion.
Yes, in the 1950s, this was not unheard of. So I would load my accordion into my little red wagon, trudge off to the bus stop, and give the driver a note from my dad saying, let my son off at such and such a street so he can take his lesson. So I went to my lesson. I did the squeeze box for 30 minutes and got back on the bus and came home. This went on for 6 weeks. And my dad said, well, your lessons are over, but would you like to continue? I said, yes, but could I get something smaller? What would you like? And I said, well, I was listening to big band music at the time. And I was really crazy about Benny Goodman and Artie Shaw. So I said, how about the clarinet? Well, that only lasted 2 weeks because he got tired of buying reeds for me. I kept breaking the reeds. He said, let me get you something that's a little more sturdy. So he gave me a trumpet, and I stuck with trumpet until 9th grade. And 9th grade, I auditioned for the varsity band, and I got in. And there was this whole row of trumpets and only one French horn. And she was really cute. And I wanted to, I didn't want to be just a nobody in the trumpet section. So at the end of the first rehearsal, I asked the director if he would consider letting me play French horn. Do you have a French horn for me? And he said, sure. So he got a French horn out of the closet, gave it to me. And I played French horn from that time on. I never got anywhere with a girl.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, if there's any. I was thinking, did you ever go out on a date with her? Or
No.
Table?
Remember, I was just a freshman, right? Well, she was a junior. Juniors don't have time for freshmen. So I got to smell her perfume all year, but I never got anywhere with her.
Well, that took you through high school, and then after high school, what did you do?
Well, when I was graduating from high school, the Vietnam War was really heating up, and my dad was very ill, and we knew that he was not going to be around much longer, and I knew that I would not have money for college. So I discovered that there was a program whereby you could audition for Navy music before you enlisted. And if you passed the audition, you were guaranteed the Navy School of Music. So that's what I did. I joined the Navy, and the idea was I'm going to do 4 years in the Navy, and I'm going to get out and use the GI Bill to become a teacher. I knew from the time that I was in 9th grade, same time that I tried to get in with a girl French horn player, I knew that I was going to be a teacher because I had a very influential English teacher. And at the last day of 9th grade, we're all filing out of the classroom, and he took me aside and he said, you're the best English student I've ever had, and I think you'd be a good teacher yourself, and I'd like you to think about that. And really, Dave, that was a seminal moment for me. That was a life-changing moment. And I really revered this guy. So I said, well, I'm going to be an English teacher. And then I joined the Navy, got into the music program. And when I got to the Navy School of Music, excuse me, I found myself surrounded by symphony caliber players. And my learning curve just sped up. I mean, just to keep up with these guys, you had to practice hours a day. And once you become a musician in the military, you're considered a professional musician. And I wanted to be the best professional I could be. So at the end of 4 years, I was playing really well, and I was enjoying it. and I was getting paid to play, and I was getting applause, and I thought, well, this is not so bad. Maybe, maybe I could stay in. So I decided to stay in, but I also decided that I was going to try to go as far as I could. And that meant priming myself to apply for an officer program. So as soon as I was eligible, I'd been in 8 years. At that time, you had to do at least 8 years of enlisted service before you could apply for a commission. So I did that, and they very stupidly selected me. And by the time my career was over, I ended up being the senior officer in the Navy music program. I was the head of Navy music when I retired, but I had served as assistant leader of the Navy band and leader of the Naval Academy band in Annapolis. It was just a charmed career. I could not have asked for more.
Yeah, I was looking with my notes, and I'm going to get to those in a second. It's really amazing what you accomplish by just the stroke of luck to audition for the Navy band and get in. And if you would have not got in on that audition, who knows what would have happened?
Well, I probably would have enlisted in the Navy anyway. I certainly didn't want to be in the Army. I didn't want to be taking M1s apart and putting them back together and digging foxholes and being shot at in Vietnam. I figured if I was going to get shot at, I'd like to have a ship under me. So I mean, it was part of it was luck, and part of it was just motivation and hard work.
Well, when you were in the Navy band during the Vietnam War and during those 8 years, I'm sure you traveled around the world performing, and you must have had some really good stories to tell that happened back in those times. So give me a story or two that would just have a lot of fun with.
Well, when I graduated from the Navy School of Music, I got sent to a band in Newport, Rhode Island. And there was a veterans hospital not far away in Brockton, Massachusetts. And we got the call to put on a concert at this veterans hospital. So we got in the bus, we went to the hospital. One of the pieces that we were supposed to play was called The Shriek of Araby. And it was a takeoff on The Shriek of Araby. And the last chorus was a Dixieland group playing The Shriek of Araby. And those who were not playing were going to stand up and shoot paper airplanes across to the audience. So we got to that part. And fortunately, it was the last piece on the program. We got to that part, and several of us had made paper airplanes, not out of 8.5 by 11 paper, but out of large score paper. And so we stood up and we tossed those big airplanes out into the audience, not realizing that several of the veterans who were in the audience were suffering from shell shock and PTSD. And they saw those airplanes coming up, and they just went ballistic. So I was so ashamed and embarrassed. And I told the leader, I'm so sorry. I had no idea that was going to happen. None of us had any idea that was going to happen. And so the orderlies at the VA took care of all the guys who had been unintentionally traumatized by these well-meaning Navy musicians. And they invited us back.
Well, that's good.
They invited us back, but they told us to leave the airplanes at home.
Yeah, I think so. When did you start conducting a band? Because I know you're playing French horn for 8 years, and you went into officer school, and I guess at that time you got your bachelor's degree. At that time?
Well, I'll have to explain that in a little greater detail. I actually started conducting while I was still an enlisted player. The chief in charge of the band had to go into the hospital for some minor surgery, and he put one of the senior petty officers in charge, a guy that I knew really well. And I asked him if I could conduct a march in rehearsal. And he said, sure. And man, I was bit. The bug really, really bit me. And And in the program that I was in, you don't have to have a degree in order to receive a commission. I got a commission as a warrant officer, and my duties were limited to that of music. And when I became a warrant officer, they put me in charge. My very first band as an officer was a brand new band that had just been put together in San Diego for the express purpose of helping recruiters get into the high schools. Because there was a lot of anti-Vietnam sentiment at the time, and the recruiters were having a hard time getting into the high schools. But the schools were very happy to let a military band come in and do a free assembly for the students. So the recruiters would set up tours for us through the Director of Navy Recruiting. And we start in San Diego, and we went all up and down the West Coast. In fact, my first time in Oregon was on one of those tours. We happened to be here during the Parade of the Tall Ship. And we did such a good job for Navy recruiting that at the end of my 3-year tour, the recruiters didn't need us anymore. They were in the schools, and so the Navy disbanded that band and sent everybody off to other Navy bands elsewhere.
Well, you talked about this earlier when you said you eventually became the Navy's senior bandmaster. I'm reading this. You're head of the Navy's music program. You were the assistant leader of the Navy band in Washington, D.C., and the director of the Commodores, the Navy's official jazz ensemble. Is that right?
That's right.
So what does the Navy's senior bandmaster do?
Well, I should explain a little bit about the business with the Commodores, because as you know, French horn players don't have a whole lot to do in jazz band. But in that first band that I was in Newport, Rhode Island, you know, Newport is home to the Newport Jazz Festival, and that was a kickin' jazz band. And they spent most of their rehearsal time playing jazz. And I knew that I had to get smart about jazz if I didn't want to get left in the dust. So I sat in on every rehearsal, and all the things that I learned during those rehearsals, those are the same techniques that I use now when I run my own band. And that really stood me in good stead when an opening came up in the Commodores, and the leader of the Navy band asked me if I'd like to lead the Commodores for the remainder of my tour. I had already done 2 years at the Navy band as the third leader. And I spent my last year as leader of the Commodores, and golly, what a great experience that was.
It sounds fantastic. And I'm sure that with all those groups, and these were based, at least some of them were based in and around Washington, D.C.
Right.
So you must have had some great performances with some of those groups and played for some, I would think, important people or famous people. What were some of the most memorable performances that you had in the Washington, D.C. area?
Well, the premier military bands for all the services are in Washington, and there are certain places that they all play. They take turns, and I did a concert on the East Lawn of the White House, where we essentially did West Side Story with concert band and singers, and the audience was shoulder to shoulder. That was certainly one of my highlights as a conductor in Washington, D.C. But there are two events in other bands that I really have to mention. One was my last assignment as an enlisted player. I was stationed in Italy, and it was sea duty, and the flagship went to Dubrovnik, Yugoslavia, and the public affairs officer had set up a concert for the band that was going to take place in the town square in Dubrovnik. So we went there, not really knowing what to expect, and the square was huge. was almost the size of Pioneer Courthouse Square. And on 3 sides of the square, there were apartment buildings with windows facing the square. And so we got there about an hour and a half before we were supposed to play, and we set up and we went off to get something to eat. And when we came back, we could hardly get to the bandstand because the crowd was so large. Really, Dave, they were shoulder to shoulder, and people hanging out the windows of those apartments to listen to us play. So we were supposed to play for an hour, and we got such wonderful applause. I said to the guys, "Well, let's do an encore." So we did an encore, then we did another, and we did another. So we played everything in the book. And our hour concert turned into a concert that was just over 2 hours, and everybody's chops were like hamburger, and they didn't care because the audience response was just so wonderful. And the other concert that really sticks out in my mind was when the ship was in Okinawa, and the public affairs office scheduled us to play at the leper colony in Okinawa. And my guys didn't want to play. Obviously they were concerned that they might get sick, they might become ill. So I had to call the fleet surgeon down to talk to everybody and convince them that we know much more about leprosy now than we did when this colony was established. There's no way you're going to get sick. And so they said, well, okay. And I mean, the bus ride from the ship to the colony was so silent, you could have heard a pin drop. I mean, I'm looking around at my guys, and they're all thinking, oh, what have we got into now? So we set up, and it was an outdoor concert. We're going to do 2 concerts with a half hour in between. And so we had all these folks sitting in chairs in front of us, like an amphitheater. They had us up on a stage, and we're looking down at them. And we started to play, and they started to cry because we were the first live entertainment they had ever had.
Wow.
I didn't realize that was what was going on at the time. I found out later. And so I had a pretty good singing voice in those days. And so I took the microphone, and I went off the stage. The band is playing, and I got right down in front of this lady whose face was disfigured and whose hands were like this. And I sang directly to her, and I'm telling you, I could barely hold it together. And at the end of the concert, it started to cloud up. And the lady at the colony said, I think we're going to have to move you indoors. You'll have a completely different audience this time. I said, okay. And we had 2 sets. We were going to play different music. So we moved indoors just in time for this huge downpour to come down. We got in just in time. We played the second concert, and it was just as emotional as the first one. And that concert will forever live in my memory. It was really a unique experience.
Well, and not only for your memory, that's one of those lasting moments for, like, that woman you're singing to, and for the people that were there that had not had a live concert for years. I can't imagine what that would be like for them. Well,
they were overwhelmed, and the guys were too. And everybody was chattering on the bus back to the ship. They said, "Boy, I sure am glad we did that show."
Before I forget, if you do have a question for Michael, go ahead and you can post that in the comment section if you're watching this live stream, of course, with the YouTube comment section. We'd love to hear from you. What part of your career did you start conducting the U.S. Naval Academy Band?
I had progressed in promotions to the rank of lieutenant commander. And the leader of the Naval Academy Band was getting ready to retire, and the head of the Navy music program, who's the person who writes the orders for everybody to transfer to one place or another, called me up and said, have you bought a house where you are now? I said, no, but I'm looking. He said, don't buy one. He said, I think I'm going to have to transfer you to the Naval Academy. And I had been the assistant leader of the Naval Academy years before. And that's one of two premier bands in the Navy. One is the Navy Band in Washington, and the other is the Naval Academy Band in Annapolis. And I said, I'd love to go to the Naval Academy. He said, I'll have more information for you in about 2 weeks. Sure enough, 2 weeks later, he called me up and said, I'm going to issue you orders for next month to go to the Naval Academy. I said, okay, I'll be ready. And so I got there, and the band, when I walked into the band room, the concert band was rehearsing with the officer that I was going to replace. And I thought, oh, these guys are so good. I hope I can measure up. I hope I can be the kind of leader that can add just a little more musicianship to this group. I mean, that was by far my favorite tour of duty, because I was there for 4 years, and the guys were, you could put any piece of music in front of them, and they could read it almost at sight.
I'm sorry. So the people in the Naval Academy Band, were they all cadets? Were they all?
No, they're not cadets. They're professional full-time Navy musicians who are stationed there to provide musical support to the academy.
Okay, and
So,
I didn't know that. When I heard that it was a Naval Academy Band, I was just thinking it was like a regular college, and they would get the cadets who could play an instrument. I didn't realize that they were all professional musicians or part of the Navy music.
yeah, they're all just like I was when I first enlisted. They're all professional full-time musicians, but you have to pass a really rigorous audition to get into that group, because for the players in the band, that's permanent assignment. Once they get there, they can do a whole career in that spot. And the thinking on that is that the longer the players are together, the better they sound. And that's the case with the Navy Band in DC and the Academy Band in Annapolis. But no other Navy bands are like that.
So when you're with the band in Annapolis, where did you travel to? I would think you wouldn't travel down to Washington since there's already a band there.
No, we didn't. We didn't go to DC very much. We stayed to the east, pretty much, of Washington DC. I would say that one of the longest trips we took was during the bicentennial, where the Academy Band went to Lexington and Concord to do 2 parades, one in Lexington, one in Concord. And the first parade was 7 miles long, and the second parade was 9 miles long. So the guys marched 16 miles that day, and at the end of the second parade, it sounded just as strong as they did in the first march. I mean, those players were phenomenal. They were just fantastic.
Well, now, what was the last assignment you had in the Navy?
I had finished my tour at the Naval Academy, and I got assigned to be the head of the Navy music program in Washington. And that person is the one that handles all the personnel matters, all the money. I was in charge of an $8.8 million budget. I couldn't even buy myself a Coke from it, but that's all right. And I was in an office with an assistant director and 3 really fine enlisted people who were responsible for writing the orders, taking care of the inventory, and managing the budget. So I was in charge of all that, but of course I had subordinates to do most of the difficult work.
But still, that's quite a lot of responsibility. I mean, that's a lot of money and a lot of personnel to be in charge of.
Well, you each in an ideal world, each assignment that you get is supposed to be a new challenge for you, something for you to build into your resume, if you will. And I had not thought that my final assignment would be as head of the Navy music program, because not too many people know this, but in November of 1994, I was named to be the next leader of the Navy band in Washington. The leader was getting ready to retire. And at that same time, I was coming up for consideration for promotion to captain, which is the highest rank that a bandmaster can hold. And I found out that there were 18 in my category that were up for promotion. I was the only band director, and they were only going to select five out of 18. I thought my chances can't be very good because I don't have a warfare specialty. And sure enough, the promotion list came out. My name was not on it. So I did not get the Navy band. They gave it to another officer, and I had to retire because that's the way it is in the military. If you don't get promoted, you have to retire. Well, fortunately for me, I had finished my master's and doctoral degrees in Annapolis and as head of the Navy music program, and I was all ready to teach at the college level. And I put out about a dozen resumes, and Pacific invited me in for an interview, and I guess I said the right things because I'm still here.
Wow, that's fascinating. I had no idea, and that's one of the reasons I like doing this, talking with all you amazing band directors, finding out these things. It's really quite remarkable, and to our benefit that you did. I'm glad you didn't get the promotion. now you're here with us, and I get a chance to spend some time with you. So you got into Pacific, and one of the things that I found interesting is that you've done a lot of research and written books about music of Canadian and Australian composers. So
Right.
what got you interested with writing about the Australian and Canadian composers?
Well, my interest was really in research. You get in your master's program, you get a course in research methodology, and I was not looking forward to it. But I had a marvelous teacher who really got me interested in digging around and finding information that she had assigned to me and to the other members of the class. And when I came to Pacific, it was really clear that in order to get promoted to full professor, you had to meet certain academic requirements, and one of them was to publish an article in a peer-reviewed journal, or to write a book, or some significant contribution to scholarship. And so the idea to do a book on Canadian music came up when I went to Canada to adjudicate a festival where the larger bands had been encouraged to play a Canadian piece of music, a piece by a Canadian composer, or one that had to do with Canada, even though it might not have been written by a Canadian. And I was actually embarrassed to discover that, and up to that point, I thought I knew band literature pretty well, but I did not know any of that Canadian music. And it was so well written and so tuneful, I thought, I have to learn more about this. So when I was eligible for a sabbatical, I went to Canada to research music by Canadian composers, thinking that I'll have enough information when I come back to maybe do a presentation at OMEA in Eugene some year. But when I pulled everything together, I discovered I had enough for a book. So I contacted a publisher that I know and asked him if he'd be interested in publishing the book. And he said, "There is no comparable book. I'd be happy to publish your book when you get it ready." So I smoothed everything out, and next thing I knew, the book was published, and I'm very proud of it.
And I think I remember you've done some sessions. We've done a number of sessions at the conferences. And did you do a session on composers from not the United States?
Right. Yeah, I did. I did a session on Canadian music, and I had the band there to play. And what had happened was when I applied for the sabbatical, you have to tell them what you expect your outcomes are going to be. And I had said, well, one of my outcomes is going to be a concert of Canadian music. And the university band did a beautiful job on that for our fall concert. And we repeated the program when we got to OMEA in January. And kind of the same thing happened with the Australian book. My next sabbatical, I went to Australia and talked to a bunch of Canadian composers and wrote a book on that. And the university band got accepted to perform at All Northwest in Spokane. And we did an all Australian concert on that program.
Well, I've been talking about traveling to Australia and with the Navy, of course, being all around the world. And I see that you've conducted honor bands in Canada, South America, Europe, Asia, and Australia, as well as here in the United States. You've really traveled the globe, Michael. What were some of the differences? Go ahead.
They used to say, join the Navy and see the world. And I was fortunate to be able to do that.
Well, when you're doing these honor bands, especially in Asia and some of these other places, well, what were the differences or similarities between each of these different honor bands from around the world?
Well, the level of musicianship is different everywhere you go. I was invited 2 years ago to conduct an honor band made up of international students in Nairobi, Kenya. And some of those students are really quite good. And some of them were in band because their parents made them be in band. So I had to pick a program that would appeal to the students who were not musically gifted, particularly, but would not be too boring for those who had some ability. And that turned out to be one of the most fun programs I've ever done. I had 104 young men and women in that band, and they just ate it up. It was so much fun.
And you've also, again, looking at my notes, in New Zealand, I guess it was in 2002, you judged the New Zealand Concert Band Festival.
Right.
So is that high school or is it community bands? What type of festival was it?
It was a festival of high school bands. It was the New Zealand National Band Festival. And I did all adjudication, no conducting, except for one piece. I conducted one piece with a group of students who were obviously above average. And I met one of my fellow adjudicators was from England and another was from Australia. So they had a truly international adjudication team. And we laughed, we had a good time. And let me just say too, that in all the previous interviews that you've done, there's one thing that all your interviewees have had in common, and that is that they all have just loved what they've done. And I think it was Dave Becker who said that if you love what you do, it's not work. It's not work at all. And I've never felt, even one day when I swing my feet out of bed, I've never felt ever that, oh, gee, I don't want to go to work today.
And that's something that the students pick up on. The students know if you're enjoying what you're doing. If they really, they're not dumb. They can pick up on the smallest things.
No, they're really astute. They can tell if your heart is in it and if it isn't. I mean, if you're, I had made up my mind that I would give 100% every day, but my 100% on one day may not be the same as 100% on a day when I'm really banging on all 8 cylinders. So I think the students pick up on that. They know if you're really engaged, and they know if you care about them. They know if you care about them. And I've seen some teachers who bark at their students. You know, I go to adjudicate bands all over, and sometimes the director will be short-tempered with the students. I don't think you can do that. You have to love your students even when they tick you off.
Right.
You have to let them know that you're there for them, that you're willing to be the adult in the room, not raise your voice, and be as positive an influence as you can. I mean, some of the things that I did when I was in the Navy, when I was in front of band in the Navy, I would never do with a young, impressionable student.
Right. And I've seen this when I've done adjudicating or bands, or especially in the sighting room, is that the students have a tendency to be like their band director.
Yeah.
So if you're showing them a lot of love and care, and with discipline, of course, but they do respond to that.
They absolutely do.
Well, in addition to conducting all the bands at Pacific, you're also the conductor of the Oregon Symphonic Band. So what is it like to conduct that group?
Well, I call that my kicks band. They're like the band at the Naval Academy. You can put anything in front of them and they'll play it practically at sight. And the way I got to be invited to that job was strictly by chance. I had just moved to Oregon. Jane and I were we had arrived on one day, and we immediately went to Fred Meyer, and we bought an air mattress because our furniture hadn't arrived. So we were renting a house and sleeping on an air mattress and making do and living out of a suitcase. And I had shipped a box of books ahead of time to the university, and I knew that they had arrived. So I told Jane, well, I'm going to go to the university and put this box of books in the bookcase, and I'll be back. So while I was putting the books away, the phone rang. And the lady on the other end says, "Is this the new band director at Pacific?" I said, "Yes. This is Michael Burch Pesses." She said, "My name is Connie." Golly, I can't think of her last name right now. But she says, "We're putting on Man of La Mancha at Theater in the Grove, and we need a music director. Can you help us?" I said, "Oh, no, Connie. I just arrived. I'm still getting used to time on the West Coast, and we're living out of a suitcase, and so I don't think I can be your director." And I said, "Who's directing now?" And she said, "Well, we have a pianist, but she's having a little bit of trouble with some of those rhythms. Man of La Mancha is very rhythmic." And so she said, "Well, if you can't be our director, could you come over tonight and help us out a little bit?" I said, "Well, sure." I had done La Mancha before, so I knew what it was all about. So I went home and I told Jane about the call, and she said, "Don't you dare agree to be conductor of that show." I said, "No, honey, no, I'm like this. No, I'm just going to help him out for tonight." And so I went there, and honest to goodness, David, it was it was really it was a disaster. I learned that the reason the conductor wasn't being very effective with the pit was because she was at the back of the pit. She was playing piano in the back. I mean, you can't see any conducting gestures if the conductor's behind you. So I helped him out a little bit. And Henry Dietz was playing oboe in the pit at the time.
And tell us who Henry Dietz is, in case I don't know.
Well, Henry is a retired band director here in Oregon, wonderful reed player, and he was the president of the board of directors of Oregon Symphonic Band. Well, of course, I didn't know this, so I'm helping them out. I'm talking to the cast. I'm helping the band, and I looked at my watch, and it was 11:30, and I had promised Jane I would be home at 10. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm really in trouble now. So I said, "Well, guys, I'm sorry. I hope I've been helpful, but I have to leave." And as I was leaving, Elburn Cooper's wife, who was playing flute in the band, in the pit, I was leaving, she reached up and grabbed my arm as I was leaving, and she looked up at me with this pleading look in her face, and she said, "Please help us." And I said, "Okay." So it's after 11:30. I'm getting home, and as soon as I walk in the door, Jane is so perceptive. She says, "You took that job, didn't you? You agreed to do that band." I said, "Yeah, I had to do it." And it happened that one of the major players in the cast was a physics professor at Pacific. And so he spread the word about me before I ever had my first day of classes. I went to the first day of teachers' meetings, and everybody there knew who I was already because Tom Griffith had told them, "Oh, wait till you meet the new band director." So thank goodness Jane forgave me, and Tom Griffith really helped me get settled at Pacific.
We're getting close to our time, so to speak. And again, if anybody has a question, feel free to write it in the comments section. There's a couple of people that posted some things I'll talk to you about afterwards. They just wanted to say how much they appreciated you, Michael.
Oh, bless their hearts.
What if you had to pick one piece of music that you conducted throughout your entire career that really made the goosebumps stand up on your arms? What was it?
Wow. Could be Russian Christmas Music by Alfred Reed. That was one of Alfred's first pieces. He actually wrote that when he was still in the Army. And I mean, every time I even just think about that piece, I get the hair on my arm stand up.
Mm-hmm.
But when I first got to Pacific, there was no way the band was prepared to play anything like that. In fact, my first rehearsal at Pacific was an unqualified disaster. When I had gone to Pacific for my interview, I had a band of about 40 or maybe 45 players. But when I got to my first rehearsal, there were only 19 players there, and 7 of them were flutes.
Oh, no.
So to say that the band was out of balance was really a mess. And so I asked one of the seniors there, I said, "Where is everybody that was here last year?" And they said, "Well, they're waiting to see how you do before they join." I said, "If they don't join to see how I do, I won't be doing very well." So I think one of the things that I had to overcome was simply the fact that my predecessor was so good. I had a terrific turnover from Chris Bruyere, who had been the band director before. Chris went from Pacific to Hood Community College to be a dean there, and he was greatly loved. And I knew I had big shoes to fill, but I didn't realize that they were waiting for me to either stand up or fall before they said, "Yeah, we'll be on your team." So I went to the admissions office, and I got the names of all the band members that had not graduated, and I went knocking on dorm room doors.
Mm-hmm.
And I had very few freshmen in the band because naturally Chris had not done a great deal of recruiting before he left. So at the end of the year, I ended up with 33, which is a whole lot better than 19, and the balance was much, much better. So this last year, the band was 56.
Oh, wow. That's really, you've got to feel good about that.
I really do. And they're all terrific young people too.
When I had the opportunity to come in and conduct your group a couple of times when you had another commitment, and I was always amazed on how not only were they good musicians, but they're good people.
Yeah. We seem to attract a remarkable cadre of kids to Pacific, and it's my blessing to have that happen.
Well, but then again, like I said before, students they act like their band director. They meet the band director's expectations. So without your guidance, I know for a fact that they would not be as good as they are.
Well, thanks very much. I do feel like You need to challenge them without overwhelming them. And the music that we do, it's all good stuff. There's no fluff in our programs, and I've always felt that the literature that we pick is the equivalent to the textbook in any other class. So I feel like I have to challenge them, and I'm not the kind of person to just get them from one concert to the next. I tell them about the composer, tell them the history of the piece, and what it was all about. That makes a difference.
Well, and I've always told people the hardest part of my job when I was teaching at Lake Oswego was picking the right music. You've got to pick the right music. But for our final question, or a couple questions, a hobby of yours. I've heard that you are a comic book collector.
Yes, I'm an inveterate comic book collector. In fact, these bookcases behind me, those are my graphic novels. And over here, obviously this is my home office, these three filing cabinets hold my comic book collection.
So how many,
I put 2 rows of comics in each drawer.
so about how many comic books do you own?
Just over 5,600.
5,600? Wow.
I don't know any better.
With all those comic books, if you had to pick one favorite comic book, what would it be that you have in your collection?
Oh, I have a reprint. It's not the original of Amazing Fantasy 15, which was the first appearance of Spider-Man, where his Uncle Ben tells him, with great power comes great responsibility.
Well, that's where Budweiser got that saying.
Well, it was in a 1950s comic.
Yeah, they ripped that off. I'm sure they're not paying royalties for that.
No, I'm sure if Stan Lee were still alive, he would still be cussing them under his breath. But I don't collect for the purpose of reselling. I collect because I'm interested in the comic, and it has to have good art, and it has to have a storyline with character development. If it's all just Hulk smash, then that doesn't hold any appeal for me. It has to have good art and good storyline.
Well, good art, good storyline. That also sounds like something you'd be teaching with your band. So, Michael, thank you so much for taking your time this afternoon, being here with me. I really enjoyed speaking with you.
Thanks again for the invitation, Dave. This was fun.
And thanks to everybody else who actually have watched this live stream, or if you're watching this later on, thank you for making this all possible.